And good evening, and welcome once again to another edition of the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. Excuse me. And, well, tonight, it's Monday night, and after a week absence, I am back. I know that it was hard to suffer through the mini Twitter reviews that I gave last week, but here we are, back in style, ready for a long-form edition of New Comics, bitches! So, welcome back. Again, I'm sorry that last week was just my allergies. I'm taking basically Flonase, which I had to get a prescription for from my doctor, who I didn't see until Thursday, and until then, my allergies were just kicking the living shit out of me. God damn you. Right. Strike anywhere matches, people. They're good for you. And they taste good, too. But anyway. So just beginning with some news this week. So the first TV commercial for Man of Steel is out. I have to say that is starting to look kind of, honestly, there's I didn't really notice any new footage or anything like that, but I am looking forward to seeing it. But, to be fair, still, nothing is really topping Iron Man 3 or certainly Star Trek Into Darkness anytime soon. The one really interesting piece of news that that I just thought of, thankfully, was that the principal photography or production has begun for Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and we're going to be getting some. It's a very interesting cast. Now I can't remember the names of the people directing this film, because it's two brothers. I can never remember who the hell they are, and frankly, I don't even know where they got their start. For some reason, Community keeps popping into my head. For some reason, that may have something to do with. I have no idea. I don't think so. I don't know. Whatever. The point is that because the big kind of interesting casting coup for this film was Robert Redford is going to be playing kind of an elder statesman of S.H.I.E.L.D. named Alexander Pierce. Now, for those of you who may or may not know, Alexander Goodwin Pierce, I think, was originally introduced in the Nick Fury versus S.H.I.E.L.D., I think, 4-issue miniseries, deluxe edition miniseries that they used to do. And he was kind of a young upstart agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and this kind of parlayed into the newer kind of late 80s, early 90s Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. series, which I collected, I think, for 5 issues, but then I was just frustrated as all hell with it. Kind of interesting that basically taking, someone who was significantly younger than Nick Fury and making him a lot older than Nick Fury. But yes, will basically kind of co-starring is Scarlett Johansson. She'll be reprising her role as Natasha Romanoff, as I expected, because obviously her and the Winter Soldier have a history together. And whether or not part of this movie will be delving into that, I know that Frank Grillo is going to be playing Crossbones, so we're going to have him. Obviously, Sebastian Stan is going to be returning as Bucky, aka the Winter Soldier, and I keep forgetting the name of the girl that was going to be playing Agent 13. Again, it's nobody I've ever really heard of. Haley Atwell will be returning, but I'm assuming either only in flashback, or I don't know if they're going to give her some hideous old woman makeup, which I think would really suck, to be quite honest. But of course, Anthony Mackie is going to be playing the Falcon. We knew that for a while, though. So very excited to see how that's going to turn out. As far as comics are concerned, the kind of big news that came out recently was that Gail Simone released some more information about the Movement, her new title at DC, which is her kind of Occupy movement. Kind of in the DC universe type of thing, and she's bringing back two of her own creations. One of them is the character Catharsis from her recent, part of the Nightfall group in Batgirl, and the other one is the character of Tremor from Secret Six. Now, to be perfectly honest, I don't really remember Tremor, and I feel bad about that. I don't have Secret Six in trade. I just have it in the single issues, and I probably should get it in trades because I do love rereading it. Yeah, Tremor. I mean, to be perfectly honest, if she was going to bring back a character, I was really hoping it was going to be like Scandal Savage or something like that. That would just be really cool. And of course, the whole the Trinity War at DC is kind of coming into play here. We have it's going to be like the Phantom Stranger and the Question and Pandora are all going to be part of this Trinity War and so on and so forth. But since it involves people that are by and large in the Phantom Stranger comic, to be perfectly honest, I'm not that interested, but whatever. We'll see how that ends up playing. I mean, because I don't collect any of the team books from, I mean, okay, with the not any of the big team books, not Justice League, not Justice League of America. So it's just, it's Batman, it's, the stuff I get from DC, you know what I get. So whether or not how that's going to end up, introducing itself into some of the titles that I do read, like Justice League Dark or something like that, I have no idea. I'm assuming that Justice League Dark will be a part of this because, it's the Phantom Stranger and the Question and Pandora, and they're all kind of part of what the Justice League Dark does. So anyway, so on with this week's books. So first, of course, we're going to attack Marvel. There were some good books this week. There were some not so good books this week. And of course, some kind of moderate books this week. So on the good side, so we're going to start off with All New X-Men number 10. Now basically what we have here is, we kind of open up with, what appears to be a robbery being committed by the original X-Men and Wolverine. But of course it's Mystique and Lady Mastermind and Sabretooth are ripping this bank off for $10 million or for like $18 million. And of course it's, the rest of them are all, the original 5 X-Men are all just illusions, but Wolverine, of course, illusion, but being played by Victor Creed. So he actually does kill somebody, because what is Sabretooth if he can't kill somebody? Then we, of course, go back to the new X-Mansion, on the grounds of the Jean Grey School. And, of course, there are the uncanny X-Men. You have, of course, you have the older Scott, you have Emma, you have Eric, and you have Illyana, who are all basically saying, we're not here to fight, we're not here to start any shit. And of course, Wolverine is just champing at the bit to put, some adamantium cause through Scott Summers. And they're basically saying, well, any students who are looking to leave this academy and learn how to exist in the real world of mutants, come on over to us. We're going to be starting up our new Xavier school. And of course, this is coming from the guy who killed Charles Xavier. So, I mean, you talk about brass balls. I mean, that's that's some major, major shit. And so there's some, there's obviously, some questioning, some this, some that, some of the other thing. And then you get, they say, okay, we're going to be back in a day. Whoever wants to come will be welcome. Whoever wants to stay, understand that, we're kind of in this for the long haul. So, try not to get in our way. So it's not really threatening, but just kind of saying, we're here and we're not going anywhere. We're going to start to teach these kids to become warriors because they need to learn how to fight against, the humans and the other mutants who are looking to put these guys out of business. Because sooner or later, there will be sentinels and there will be these threats that only these people can deal with, that only the warriors can deal with, and not just students. So obviously this is all taking place on the periphery of Wolverine and the X-Men, because he's still there. All the students are still there. There's no, this takes place either before or after, whatever, we don't know, because the X titles don't seem to really have much crossover into each other. But I mean, I think mostly they're there because Quentin Quire has some nice moments, with some nice kind of egging Wolverine on to take him on. Of course, we have this awesome moment with Krakoa, who opens up his mouth and swallows the uncanny X-Men, and they of course make their way out. And in the end, of course, it's the Cuckoos, the Stepford Cuckoos, who leave, of course, to be with Emma Frost, and a surprise cliffhanger mystery person is going to be leaving as well, but we don't know who. So here's the thing, is that there are some, Bendis, of course, he is, he's brilliant with dialogue, he's great with character, and there are some great character moments. There's some terrific character beats, particularly with the conversation between Beast and young Cyclops, young Scott, and he keeps referring to the young Scott, saying that you do these things, when he's referring to the things that happen to the older Scott. And Cyclops is really starting to get bothered by all this, and Cyclops, of course, kind of makes his stand against his older self and says, we're here, we're not going back. We've earned this, we've earned this trip to be here. And then Emma Frost says, no, you've stolen the chance. Or, we've earned this chance, and she says, no, you've stolen this chance, because of Hank's intervention. The art is terrific. Of course, Stuart Immonen doing a terrific job on art. And it's really, really well done until this absurd cliffhanger ending. Because it has no power. It has, because we don't know who it is. And, the, kind of pseudo unmasking, 11th hour unmasking of, like who the villain is in something, or whatever that we get to in serialized fiction, just when they're about to take off the mask and everybody kind of gasps, like, oh, it's you, and then you don't find out who it is. That, to me, is it's kind of a shit convention of serialized storytelling, because it just, all you're doing for the next however many weeks it'll be before the next issue, or before, because I think that it'll be revealed in the next issue of Uncanny X-Men, which I'm not reading, but I don't care. to find out in another book, and I don't care who it is right now, and I don't care to guess. Of course, you still will. I mean, the odds are, I think that it'll be Jean Grey that will end up going off, because, you know, obviously the idea is there to maybe get somebody on that team who is more in, you know, maybe a little bit more in lockstep with what they believe, and obviously someone who is, you know, who knows the future and maybe looking to somehow change it for themselves. And, you know, so she seems to be kind of the front runner as far as who it is. So yes, of course, while I say I don't care to guess, I'm guessing anyway. But to me, it always has more power when you have the last page reveal of who it will be, as opposed to, so that really is like, oh my God, I can't believe that that's the person, you know, and then leaving that until the next week, you know, leaving you with that feeling, as opposed to, well, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? It's just, it's a weak dramatic, trope, and it really kind of took the air out of the issue. Because the rest of it is so good, and then you have this ending which just sucks, frankly. And but it's still a really solid issue. So I had to take off 1 star for that. So I give it a 4 out of 5, because other than that, I think it probably would have been, if they'd revealed who it was, I think they would have had a much stronger ending. So on to another new #1 that I picked up, and this will be the only time I'll be picking it up, or not pick it up, but read it, because, you know, digital download codes, they're fun, especially if you get them free. Is Thanos Rising #1. So this is Jason Aaron and Simone Bianchi are basically telling the tale of, kind of the origin tale of Thanos, which is a story that no one ever requested. And it was funny because I was reading the review of this on CBR, and it's not totally common that it happens, but it is somewhat common when I see, okay, well, this is someone who, you know, I am like totally in lockstep with everything they said. Is because part of what's cool about Thanos is we don't really know how he came to be. We know that he's a mad god of Titan, that he worships and loves death, and that's his thing. I mean, I know that, you know, obviously the desire is to build up Thanos as a character so that when we get into Avengers 2, the film, that we will have some more background on Thanos, so that maybe we can understand more of his motivations. Because what we have here is, as a young Thanos, you know, his mother immediately wants to kill him because he is different looking than all the other, you know, because he's, of course, brother to Eros, who, of course, becomes Star Fox, who is, like, the master of the, like, the mind rapiness. I've never liked Star Fox as a character. I always thought he was kind of shitty, but, you know, especially when you look at it in the context of, yes, he's kind of rapey with his powers. He's different looking, he's ostracized, and then he meets some, you know, he meets some people that kind of want to play with him and, you know, have fun, and, you know, he seems to be kind of still obsessed with death, but things that are already dead, not causing the death of other things. And then, you know, he and some friends, they go on this kind of outing to a place they're not supposed to go, and, you know, it all has to do with these animals that they're dissecting in his science class. He never wants to do anything like that. He doesn't want to, you know, Thanos doesn't want that. He doesn't want to be involved in the harming of even something that's dead. And then, of course, you know, some of the kids that he's friends with, even the girl he kind of seems to be kind of crushing on, ends up dying because of these animals. And then, you know, this strange looking, the strangest looking girl, who seems to be really intent upon, you know, seems to have kind of laser focus on Thanos, brings him back, and then, yes, he does kill some of these animals. So we see, yes, the seed is planted. And essentially what we're seeing here, and the comparison that CBR made in the review is so dead fucking on. It's basically like we are seeing the young Anakin Skywalker who would eventually become Darth Vader. Darth Vader was awesome because we didn't see what turned him into. We didn't see it. We heard about it, but we didn't see it. And now we have to watch, and then the prequels came and you had to watch the whole embarrassing crap that they were just putting out with this. And, see him being really whiny and everything like that. And admittedly, Aaron is a smarter writer than George Lucas. And Bianchi does actually easily his brightest art ever. Because he usually colors, it's usually everything that he does is colored in very dark palettes. There are thankfully no nipples, no male nipples in this because he's like the master of like huge, dark male nipples. It's really, if you look back at some of his art, you will see that. I guarantee you. If you go back to his run with Warren Ellis on Astonishing X-Men, which is shit, so don't go back to it if you don't have to. But yes, it's horrific, it's garbage, and I didn't care for his art there, but I did really like it here. There's nothing really wrong with the book other than the fact that it exists. There's no reason for this book to be here. There's just no one wants to see this. I can't imagine there being a huge audience for this. I can't imagine it selling very well. I think it's only a 5-part series or something like that. But even so, it's just meh. I mean, there's nothing really interesting going on, and nothing that you particularly want to learn about. I mean, aside from that, it's really well written. It's well paced. The art in it is really good. So it's just the problem is there's nothing to pull the audience in, really, other than the idea of, okay, well, now we get to learn about Thanos as a kid, and his, eventual, rise to power and his madness and how he kills everybody and everything like that. And I don't want to see that, to be perfectly honest. I tried it. I didn't, like I said, there's nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't work for me at all in the sense of me wanting to continue to read it. So this was a 2.5 out of 5. Like I said, because there really is nothing wrong with it. It's a pretty good comic if we're about anybody else. Deadpool, number 7. This is just a really, really, really fun issue. Almost a pick of the week. There aren't many this week. There was only one issue of any comic that kind of really blew me away this week. And even that was kind of a weak kind of blow me away. I almost kind of graded this week on a curve, so some stuff might sound a little bit weird. But anyway, so basically we have Deadpool. Basically, this whole issue is it is a tribute, kind of. It is them having is Jerry Duggan and Brian Posehn having great fun with kind of the end of the Bronze Age, right before we stepped into the modern age, when we still had the Hostess fruit pie ads in the comics, and the coloring was very newsprinty. It just, and that's one of the things that the issue itself is just, it is so many great little attacks on some of the flaws of kind of the Bronze Age of comics, particularly in Marvel. And basically what this is Deadpool is basically being inserted into the Iron Man Demon in a Bottle story arc. It's basically, he has been hired by a demon who is who is kind of illegally collecting souls, and he is looking to get Deadpool's soul if he can keep Iron Man drunk. And so, he goes to, and, there's these great moments early on with Peter Parker, where he's, you see kind of, that era of him where, he's, always kind of in the background of everything that's going on at the Daily Bugle, and he's telling people, he gets to a point where, he's so marginalized by Jonah and by Robbie and by Ben Urich that, he's even saying out loud, yes, I'm Spider-Man, I got my powers from a radioactive spider, and so on and so forth. And then, so we have Deadpool, and we have this great parody of the Hostess Fruit Pie ads that takes place in a liquor store. And it's hilariously funny. And then you have all of these, just little moments throughout the book that are they're just awesome. They're so funny. They're so fun. It's so creative. And, in the end, even, Deadpool, he has some, weird 80s, he's kind of decked out in some weird 80s style and stuff like that. It's so fun. And there's no, again, there isn't much substance. I know that, don't get your knickers in a twist there, Matt, because, like I said, there can obviously be substance to a Deadpool comic, but, here, let's face it, this issue is just meant to be sheer fun. It's sheer enjoyment. It's sheer pleasure. It's sheer hilarity, and it works incredibly well. And, artist Scott Koblish, excuse me, and colorist Val Staples do a fantastic job of replicating that look of the Bronze Age. And, we even have this ending letters column, which is basically, Duggan and Posehn are referring a lot of their friends. People like, it's like there are these little mini letters written by, Paul Scheer and Patton Oswalt and so on and so forth. Again, kind of like these little shout outs to their comedian friends. And it's filled with all these strange and wonderful anachronisms of that era that are totally twisted and turned on their head. Of course, we still have this shout out of Cable and Deadpool, kind of Back to the Future, Doc Brown, Marty McFly style. And it's so much fun. You can't not have a lot of fun with this issue. It's just, because there isn't, I guess, this, okay, I will upgrade this to a pick of the week, because it is, just thinking about it, and when I reread it tonight, I was enjoying it. Just thinking about it, I'm enjoying it even more, going through it in my head. So this really was kind of a pick of the week. I know I'm kind of starting it off early then, but this was, a very solid 4.5 out of 5, and again, more that I think about it, edging more towards 5. So this was just a wonderful issue. So it's Deadpool number 7, a real knockout. Superior Spider-Man number 7. I know that you're all dying to hear my thoughts about this one, because I know that none of you read it. So, and I would be interested for those of you who, of course, hate this idea to pick up an issue of this and just see if you think it works at all. Because I don't know, because I know that a lot of you are just kind of boycotting it on principle. Some of you just are saying, well, I just don't want to read this. I think that you might be, of course, a couple issues ago, this was absolutely horrifying, and I was this close to dropping it. But I wanted to stick with Slott and see what he had in store. Well, basically what we have here in this issue is that the vigilante Cardiac, who I don't really remember, he's reopening Mr. Negative's old clinic, and and the reason for it is that underneath the clinic, in the underground lair, if you will, is, and because I don't know much about cardiac, I assume that it would be for all kinds of evil stuff, but actually it's all these really great things that he's doing, you know, with saving lives and so on and so forth. And, you know, there's this one particular child that is, you know, dying of this very, you know, rare disease, and he needs to steal something to help this this young woman. And when we start to see, you know, and then of course Octospidey kind of gets the call, and he starts to go after Cardiac and is about to, again, put on some major hurt in perhaps a fatal way, because the thing that he's stealing from this warehouse is something that Doc Ock created. And it's basically the thing that helped him to communicate mentally with his arm, with his mechanical arms. So, you know, this insults him to no end, you know, because, you know, people pilfering off of his genius. And here's, of course, where we start to see, we saw it a little bit earlier in the issue, but here we start to see that, yes, Peter is starting to exert more control. He is able to kind of break in and sort of stop some of the things that Otto is doing or is about to do. We see him try, while Otto is asleep, to try and write a little note that he can pass on. But of course, you know, none of this might not, a lot of this stuff might not even mean anything for Peter, for Ghost Peter, because what we get here is the Avengers call him in and say, look, you're not the Peter Parker that we fought alongside. You're not the same Spider-Man. What's going on? And he just doesn't feel like, you know, discussing it. He just doesn't, he feels these people are all beneath him, so on and so forth. You know, in the typical, you know, egotistical Doc Ock way, and nothing like Peter Parker. And this, you know, says, okay, well, you know, you are getting head to toe physical. You're not leaving until we make sure that you indeed are Spider-Man. And we have Peter kind of sort of fucking with Ock in his head, and this is causing him to look even more unbalanced. So now we're set up for the melee. We're set up for the fight between, you know, because it's Cap, Thor, Black Widow, Spider-Woman, Wolverine, all looking to, you know, and Octospidey is looking to take them all on. So, you know, I have to say that this is some good reading. This was an entertaining issue. I was very into it. I mean, of course, there are leaps, you know, Grand Canyon-sized leaps of logic that you have to take in regards to now, okay, so Peter's starting to exert this more control. Well, where was he when, you know, Ock gunned down Massacre? Or was, you know, obviously he was there in, you know, in ghosty Peter form when he laid the serious smackdown on Jester and Screwball in the previous issue, which is what's causing this intervention by the Avengers. And, you know, it's, again, this is not great. This is not brilliant entertainment. This is not up to kind of the normal standard that Slott had set once upon a time with Spider-Man. But, and I'm kind of grading on a curve here because some issues of this have been weak. Some of them very, very weak. And, you know, just downright horrible and objectionable. But this is starting it back in the right direction to a place where it is a more entertaining read. It's more fun. And, you know, Humberto Ramos's art is terrific here. he does some excellent work, and Slott, he seems to give some he gives some a little bit more relish to this book by introducing this conflict. So how is this going to then shape up for what's going to happen with Spider-Man in the future? Is he going to be a completely solo act again? Now, obviously, if we look at last week's Spider-Man Superior Spider-Man Age of Ultron issue, he is definitely still Otto Octavius in the Age of Ultron. But again, that's kind of a and that was done by I think that was Gage. It was either Gage or Yost who did that issue. I honestly can't remember, but that was a really, really good issue. I really enjoyed that issue. It was very, very strong. Stronger than this as far as a dramatic standpoint, but this is just really, really fun comic book storytelling. So I had to give it a 4 out of 5. I just thought it was really good, very entertaining. So moving on and getting into the independents, we're going to talk first about another #1, which is Harbinger Wars #1. So basically, we're taking, definitely my favorite of the Valiant books, Harbinger, and mixing in another one of my favorites, which is Bloodshot, and basically colliding them all because it's war, and what happens in war is that you pick a side, and that's the side you're on. So basically we have, PRS and the Harbinger Foundation under Toyo Harada are at war with one another. We open up with this segment of, this kind of closed door, very secret, dark room session between, it looks like, people of the, the current, president's administration are talking about what PRS has been doing, and they created this virus that they were using to test on Chinese political prisoners, and China was only too happy to afford them the opportunity to experiment. But of course, this virus that they created became actually sentient, took on a life of its own, and it caused some really awful shit. And of course, they send in these Psyot kids to kind of annihilate all of these carriers of this virus, and and they do so. But again, we get the sense these kids, they really want out. They want gone from the Harbinger Foundation, or from PRS, I should say. And what we also have going on here is that Peter has kind of this mental visit from the Bleeding Monk. And the Bleeding Monk is there to kind of warn him of a potential threat, of a possible future that he and his renegades face by not only the Harbinger Foundation, but also kind of the wild card on the deck here, which is, what the wild card from the deck being Bloodshot. And, we get, basically, Bloodshot, then we cut to Bloodshot continuing kind of his assault against PRS and saving some more Psyot kids. One of them creating this, as they escape, kind of this adorable, almost like Mufasa, kind of Lion King animated lion that actually just stomps some of the guards at PRS to mush. And Bloodshot, looks to, get them out of there and everything like that. And of course, he is, to these kids, he is the boogeyman. He is the Psyot killer. So, he is obviously trying to, restore, the faith, because obviously having lost Pulse in, in his own series, is really, he's changed his mission. His mission is now to right the wrongs that he did under the auspices of PRS, which is to get all these Psyots out and get them free. Of course, Harada doesn't really want that to happen, because Harada thinks that he is the only one that knows best for these kids. By taking them into the Harbinger Foundation, he can, you know, help them cultivate their skills and so on and so forth. And that is, of course, is where we, you know, we have our first real, the beginnings of the clash here of these two kind of major characters of Harada and Bloodshot. You know, Dysart and co-plotter Dwayne Straczynski, they do a really terrific job of storytelling here. But this is definitely the calm before the storm. This is definitely a #1 issue. It is, you know, we get the idea of things to come, and, you know, setting up the clashes, and setting up the, you know, this person's on this side, this person's on that side, this person's on the other side, wherever. And, you know, that some of these people are eventually going to come together. You know, I don't know if we're going to get Bloodshot in kind of a meet cute, fight cute kind of situation, because in this issue has a great psych out that is visited upon Peter Stanchek by the Bleeding Monk, where basically Bloodshot comes in and kills all of the renegades, all of them. I mean, you know, it just annihilates them quickly and efficiently. And it's a great little psych out, because you are looking at it and you're like, shit, is this really happening? No, it can't really be. Maybe? No, it can't be happening. But it is scary, because it still does have this really good impact. But another problem with this issue, not so much, I mean, because I don't really mind kind of the building up, because suspense, creating conflict, giving an inciting incident, so on and so forth, this is the benchmark of fiction. It's the benchmark of any conflict, certainly. But another big problem here is that there are 3 artists on this book. You have Clayton Henry, you have Miko Suon, and you have Clayton Crane. And while the art styles actually stay kind of with the narrative that they do explore, it's still very jarring. Because, you know, for instance, all the stuff that is kind of set in the modern day, that's all done by Clayton Crane, or Clayton Henry. And then you have the kind of, you know, the Sayat kids in China flashback, that's all done by Clayton Crane. And then you have Miko Suon doing the interval with Peter and the Bleeding Monk. So it does work, but it doesn't, because those transitions are really jarring. It would have just been nice to have, you know, Clayton Henry or Clayton Crane or Miko Suon do the whole issue without, you know. But I get it. I mean, they are trying, I think part of this is that they're trying to, you know, I mean, this is a long issue, it's a very dense issue. And, you know, they want to bring it in on time. So, I mean, I can understand that. I get it. But it just feels like it could have worked better with just one artist. So, but again, it's such a solidly written book, and the art is terrific, with the exception of the kind of, oh, okay, I'm with a new artist now. So 4.5 or 4 out of 5 for Harbinger Wars #1. On to Dynamite and Masks #5. So basically we get the first official appearances in this series, of this 8-part series, of Zorro and Black Bat, fully costumed, ready to go, while the rest of the team splits up again with kind of 2 purposes. You have, you know, Green Hornet and his team of the 2 people that I don't know, the kind of green monk guy and the sort of the other woman who also kind of dresses like a bat. I don't know who she is, and it's making me mad. And they are going off to try and find kind of who's behind the whole, they're following the clues basically, and then we have Shadow, Kato, and Black Terror are going to try and find out what became of Richard Wentworth, what became of the Spider, because he's MIA. So, you have some confrontation there, you have confrontation here, you have this, you have that. It's still confusing as hell. It's still confusing as hell. But Chris Robinson has kind of tightened the screws on this one a little bit. He's made the book a little bit tighter. It doesn't seem to be quite as just kind of hurdy-gurdy as it has been, just feeling so disorienting and so disassembled, where, okay, it's like, well, I know who these people are, but I don't know all of their names. But I'm kind of becoming okay with that because I know that I'm not expected to know. But at some point or another, there should be really what Dynamite. I mean, this is not me being kind of a stickler for, okay, well, this doesn't work and this does, but they should follow just some basic kind of storytelling, comic book storytelling examples. Like, for instance, just thinking off the top of my head, issue 6 of I, Vampire. This comes immediately to mind because when each character on this 2-page spread is introduced, they have a little caption as to their name and kind of what they are in one sentence, all summed up very quickly. And it does that with each of the main characters, and they should do that here. I don't know why they haven't. I don't know if they think, well, our audience is so smart and so, pulp knowledgeable, they'll just know everybody right off the bat. So yes, we know who the Shadow is, we know who the Green Hornet is, we know who Zorro is, we know, well, thanks to the recent relaunch, we know who the Spider is. And so on and so forth. And again, kudos to Mark Waid on his Green Hornet title. That was really, really good stuff. And I did want to mention one thing just real quick about that. It was the first time that I'd ever heard reference to the fact that, yes, Britt Reed is a distant relation to John Reed, the Lone Ranger. So I thought that was really cool. But anyway, coming back to this week and to this issue, is that I just didn't, it's still just too damn hard to follow to really get into it. And that is, like I said, the screws seem to have been tightened a little bit. Dennis Calero's art is terrific. It looks great. But again, because of this, just all over the place storytelling with no kind of definitive transitional moments, I mean, I don't, a friend of mine complains a lot about films and establishing shots. He doesn't like establishing shots. He just wants it to cut to the next thing that's going on. I don't mind them. It gives me a sense, okay, this is where we are again, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. It doesn't hurt. I don't think it hurts the narrative, and I don't think it hurts the the flow as much as he does. So he might really like this book because it doesn't have any establishing shots at all, or any of those moments of pause, we're here, pause, we're here, pause, we're here. We're just expected to kind of know where we are. And there are some, of course, there are some color cues to who some of these people are, but beyond that, unless they're in costume, we still don't know. So 3 out of 5, really at best, for Masks number 5. This has been such an immense disappointment, to be quite honest. Even though this issue was okay, I was expecting such great things from this title. So, continuing with Dynamite, we have Miss Fury number 1. So this is Rob Williams, who I'm not that familiar with, and Jack Herbert. and it really is becoming, Dynamite is kind of becoming, they are kind of like the kings of the variant covers. Because, each issue has 4 variant covers. And that's okay, but I like it. I kind of liked it when it was just like 2 or maybe 3, like a retailer incentive, and one that was like 75%, one that was 25%. So when you got the 25% one, you're like, oh, cool, man. And then you have these ones where it's like, well, it's, everyone is 25%, so everybody has an equal chance to get kind of one or the other. So, whatever. So, okay, we are introduced here, well, this is another pulp revival character, where we have Marla Drake, who is a beautiful young millionaire in 1930s Manhattan. And she's kind of a cross, the character of Miss Fury, seems to be kind of a cross between Catwoman, Wolverine, the Hulk, and Captain Midnight. So, because she is kind of this, her morality is very whatever, because she is so rich and she is so privileged, she was always kind of treated to everything that she wanted, and then she went to Kenya and had a really, had this kind of, a little too touchy-feely, super uber masculine guide, and this guide was a bad dude. She kind of set kind of this trap for him to die in, and then was welcomed by some of the local villagers, and they gave her basically this potion that would give her superhuman strength. And it did kind of give her, again, this feeling of, well, what is life if we're not living it to the hilt? And, of course, she comes home when she hears about her father's death, and she's inherited all this money, and, she's, like 20, I think she's like 25 years old or something like that. And so one of the things that she likes to do is to steal things. Steal really high-priced things, but also she likes to dress up and become Miss Fury, who, again, is this... She is more of, like, this kind of out of control. She's filled with rage, and she's just beating the living shit and killing everybody, killing Nazis, basically. That's kind of where the Captain Midnight things come in, is that, that's kind of the aspect of that character. The only character that I can kind of instantly kind of identify with fighting Nazis. Now, I mean, obviously Indiana Jones would be the first one that would really come to mind, but, this is not really an Indiana Jones-ish character, because Indiana Jones never sets out to fight Nazis. It just kind of happens. So she's, in the beginning she's wasting Nazis, and then there's this guy who keeps talking about the future. He's, we're going to win here, we're going to win there, in your future, so, you have no chance. And this strange thing happens where she is kind of pulled into the future. But then we come back to her in the past. And so she kind of bounces back and forth in time a couple times in this issue. And, in her society self, she's a real, she speaks the truth. People might call her a bitch, but, she's just telling it like it is, folks. And that's it. That's what she does. Because, again, time being too precious, life being too precious, you just waste it on, just talking, smiling through your teeth, and, just, saying what's proper. She is very, very improper. And, of course, we get to this kind of pseudo cliffhanger ending where she is pulled forward again in time, and she has kind of like the Coulson gun from the Avengers movie, and we see her and she's standing there and she's looking up, and there are these huge Nazi planes flying over New York, and it is the present. It is 2013, and the Nazis have won the war. They won World War II. So, because we've never seen that before in a comic book. And of course, this is, if the book hadn't kind of lost me before, this is really where it lost me. Because aside from Jack Herbert's kind of nicely cheesecakey art in some parts, there are some parts that are a little too they're a little too liney. It's a little too sketchy. It doesn't look quite right. But there's some bare ass in this. There's this is kind of like an M-rated pulp book, which I don't have a problem with. Obviously, I very much believe that the Shadow is very much kind of an M-rated book. Not really lately, but so you have some ass shots. You have some naughty words being spoken. You have a little bit of sex, and then you have this super angry woman fighting everybody on this rooftop, and it's like, well, why? What's her deal? I know that we're not supposed to learn an origin all in one issue, but it'd be nice to have, okay, we have this opening fight scene, and then we have this kind of origin that is supposed to maybe give us some insight into her character, but it doesn't. Aside from the fact that she just says, I live for today. And, it's always good to have another female character. But this is, again, one of those examples where I think this would be stronger if it were actually written by a woman. Because nothing seems particularly feminine or female about this woman. She just seems to be kind of, well, this is a male's kind of ideal of what a woman might be like. She's tough, she's independent, she kicks ass, she gets naked, she fucks, she steals shit, she's very beautiful, she's very rich. So again, it just feels a little bit too idealized for me to get into. There doesn't seem to be much not that there should be realism, but I never felt like I felt an emotion from this woman other than anger. And I know it's called Miss Fury, but let's have some moments of humanity that ground the character a little bit, because we never have that. There's no moments where we get to pause and just kind of live with her as just a human being, as opposed to, okay, she's either constantly conniving, or she's talking shit, or she's, killing people, or being shocked by the fact that Nazis have taken over the world. So, again, it just, there's nothing really to speak of here. I mean, that's it. That's the problem, is that there's nothing to draw a reader like myself in. Some other people might really get off on this, but not me. So this was, at best, a 2.5 out of 5. It just wasn't there. Just didn't really do it at all. So now on to DC, which has easily my biggest disappointments of the week. First, Green Arrow 19, which was not disappointing, actually was a nice surprise, because action. We had some action here. And it's an all-out action issue, because basically this is an epic archer's duel between Ollie and Komodo. And, we get to see, that, this really cool fight between the two of them. And even though, Ollie seems to really kind of get the shit kicked out of him by Komodo, he still ends up kind of getting the upper hand. And who comes to Komodo's rescue but his daughter, the kind of psycho crazy daughter, who is perhaps even a better archer than Komodo is, and Komodo's already kind of been established as being a better archer than Green Arrow. So Ollie's in a really bad way here, and we get treated to this finale, this kind of cliffhanger moment where it seems like, well, Ollie's kind of, well, first of all, the big kind of reveal of this issue is that Robert Queen, Ollie's father, did not die in a helicopter crash that was due to mechanical failure, but actually was killed by Komodo. So now we have the personal stakes being upped. It's like, oh man, okay, you killed my father, prepare to die. That's that kind of shit. So, but we have this cliffhanger which doesn't work even in the context of this issue, because the book opens up in the future where he's where Ollie is walking around Black Mesa. And so, yes, he's obviously survived. But at the end of the book, it's like, oh my god, is he going to die? Well, no, he's not. I mean, obviously, we would know that anyway, because you can't really have a Green Arrow title without Oliver Queen. Well, at least you thought you couldn't, but I don't think they're planning on bringing back Connor Hawke anytime soon. And so this is, I mean, I know that Lemire is really trying. And, like I said, it's starting to really work. This issue was definitely a step up. And Andrea Sorrentino's art, so awesome. Again, so glad that, Marcelo Maiolo is doing the coloring and not him anymore. But the problem, of course, being that this cliffhanger, again, another cliffhanger that just kind of takes the excitement, the vitality out of this book, because in the same issue, if it weren't in the same issue that we had a flash forward, then I wouldn't be quite so disappointed. But here it is. I'm disappointed. But not so much so that I would give it a bad grade, because it's a really strong, well-written, beautifully drawn issue. And so it's a 4 out of 5. But I don't know how much more Lemire can kind of keep this up, because I know, again, that his heart's in the right place. He's trying to create more of a bridge between this book and the show, hoping that, the show will bring more readers to this book, even though that there is an Arrow comic out there. Even though it's digital, well, it's not digital only, because they do release the print versions eventually. And that was another cool thing, just as a quick side note, Batgirl Beyond series. That will be interesting. I'll be looking forward to that. But just it was just, he kind of, I think, tripped over himself with his own cleverness, Lemire, in this issue. So, like I said, it's 4 out of 5, and it does, this is, again, one of those comics that does kind of make me long for some of the pre-New 52 status quo, because, it worked. And that, again, brings me to another point of comic-related news, is that for whatever reason, because I know that, Bruce Timm stepped down as head of DC Animated. So that's a huge blow to DC Animated's future, potentially, and is very much evidenced in the first non-Bruce Timm related project they're going to be doing, which, I don't know if Bruce Timm's name is going to be on this, because, I mean, he just left, and apparently they've already been in the work on this already, but they are doing Flashpoint as an animated film. It's like, Okay, so we've gone through, uh, you know, stuff like, The Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One, and Under the Red Hood, and they couldn't have thought of anything else to do other than fucking Flashpoint. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, that, honestly, it infuriates me. Because not only will it not have any kind of crossover audience, but it was a shit series. It sucked. It sucked ass. I mean, in 1 year, in the space of like 12 months, we got treated to two of the worst big event comics ever. And that was Flashpoint, which was unadulterated garbage, and then Avengers versus X-Men, which was just bottom of the barrel, a huge, giant, smelly turd in the pool. I mean, it was just awful. But it was literally like, I could not believe it. It's like, really, this has got to be. If this information had been released on April 1st, I would have thought, oh, thank God. But no, it's real. So anyway, that's just kind of my pre New 52 thinking, is that I wish that there were characters like Connor Hawke still around, so that the potential of there being an absence of Green Arrow, like if you look at iVampire, I mean, admittedly, I think everybody kind of knew that this book was a long shot to begin with, to get people on board with this, but of course Josh Fialkoff and Andrea Sorrentino, being such geniuses at the storytelling that they've been, said, well, we're going to kind of balk at all the conventions of kind of the serialized comic book, and at the end of the first arc, we're going to kill our main character. At the end of our second arc, we're going to make him evil. So I mean, it was just like, what the fuck? How awesome can this get? I mean, how many times can you change the status quo of a book until it becomes? I mean, you risk one of two things: either brilliance, which is what the book has been, or totally alienating your fan base because you've just changed it around too much and it becomes unrecognizable. So anyway, moving on. And so that way, if this if there was a potential for Oliver Queen to actually die, it would be more powerful. I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make, and it just got mixed in with all these other, this stream of consciousness that just ended up vomiting out of my mouth. So moving on to the two kind of most upsetting books of the week. Not because they were so bad, but because of a serious decline, I think, of... Fuck you. They're really old. So the thumbnail strike doesn't always work. Anyway. And first it is Animal Man, number 19. Basically, it is the funeral for Cliff. And the thrust of the family drama here is that Ellen, she just can't take anymore. She is done with the craziness. She, I mean, even at one point in time, Buddy actually does say, well, maybe I can go into the Red and maybe find him and bring him, and she just smacks him across the face. No, I don't want any more of this insanity. I want a normal life. I don't want my daughter to be an avatar of the Red. I want this to stop. We have to stop. And there's this really kind of dorky, it doesn't work, where there's this scene where Buddy, returning home from his son's funeral, is set upon by some reporters, and one of them asks, is this just, are you just trying to bump up, your profile because you're coming into award season? And, of course, this sets him off, and, he, even threatens to kill all of these, kind of, they're not, I mean, these reporters, pseudo, these kind of trash reporter paparazzi types. And then flies off because he has had enough. He doesn't want to be the guardian of the Red. He wants it to go to somebody else. And so he goes to the Parliament of the Red, and basically requests, or in this case, demands, that he, that they need to leave him alone, they need to leave his daughter alone, that they don't want to be part of this anymore, because this will help him, hopefully to bring his family back together. And the Parliament says, how fucking dare you? You are ours. Your daughter is ours. And, in the grand scheme of things, you, Buddy Baker, are nothing. So they spit him back out of the tree and out of the Red, and his powers, he cannot feel. He has no connection to his powers are still there, but he can't feel them really anymore. And that's how Buddy Baker is left. One thing about this book that was great is Steve Pugh's art. Steve Pugh's art in this issue is probably the best I've ever seen it. He does masterful work here. It is absolutely tremendous to look at. He does some brilliant stuff. But Lemire, this book is about family. Animal Man to me has always been about the dynamic of the family. Now, we have this, as I talked about before in my review of the previous issue of this, it was my wish, if I were to have one, that if someone had to die, that it would be Ellen. Because, having a single free, Animal Man could open up some interesting stuff for the future, and his children would still be with him. But no, they killed the kid, and now this kind of recreates this kind of tired old cliche of, well, the child's death tears the family asunder. And that's something that we've seen so many times in, in fiction, and it happens in real life. I get it. I mean, this, it is a horrible thing to have to live through, to see a child, one of your children, die, I would assume. I mean, I've had pets that have died on me, and it is incredibly, incredibly sad. But instead of succumbing to this kind of soap opera-y, I can't be around you anymore, I have to kind of figure it out on my own, this whole kind of, this very tired plot device, why can't it strengthen the relationship? Not strengthen it, but, say, we're having it really shitty right now, we will come back together, instead of this instantaneous, at the funeral, saying, I can't be around you anymore. I mean, it's just too fucking melodramatic, and it really, really, really bothered me. This is the kind of shit that I don't want to see in a book of this quality. Now, Animal Man has not always been great. There have been some issues, to be certain, that have been not very good. And I'm afraid that now that Rot World is done, that we are getting into this, we're kind of falling back to some of the times that it was not a very good comic. This was, I give it a 3 out of 5 because it, there is some good drama here, there is some interesting stuff going on here, and Steve Pugh's art is great. But because of this super duper melodrama that breaks out in this book, I'm just like, okay, whatever. So this could be kind of a watershed for this book being anyway, so kind of the most upsetting book for the week for me, the most well, I shouldn't really say upsetting, but just disappointing. But I knew this was, I shouldn't say I knew, I felt this would happen, and it did. And that is Swamp Thing number 19. Because we have here Charles Soule, however you pronounce his last name, Soule, and Kano taking over writing and art duties, respectively. Basically, Alec, he is now dealing with a new potential threat. This something called the Cedar, who is creating these artificial kind of these artificial kind of biospheres in the midst of, like creating this lush desert this lush forest in the middle of a desert. And because we have because we know that rot is not always a bad thing, it's just the avatar of the rot sucks. That the rot itself serves a purpose for the ecosphere, for the world, really. And despite the fact that this appearance of this new ecosystem in the desert could potentially be a very good thing, Alec knows that he has to destroy it because it's just artifice. It's unnatural for it to be there. It does not belong as part of the green. And I love the way that he's represented in the desert. He's kind of like a cactus. It's just really, I thought that was very clever. And then he kind of takes his trip through the green and winds up, and he needs a city, and he goes to Metropolis. And as he's kind of pondering some of these questions, he comes to Metropolis not just because that the botanical gardens in Metropolis are quite beautiful, but because he kind of wants to talk to Superman, because Superman must have to make these kinds of decisions every day, because he essentially kind of has the powers of a god. And he can choose to work tirelessly day and night to save everybody and everything, but he doesn't. And Alec wants more insight on how to deal with things like what the Cedar is doing. And he comes across Scarecrow, who's trying to pick some very familiar blue flowers. And, of course, he tries to use his fear gas on him. It doesn't work the first time. He tries a couple more times, and he finally gets the right mixture to start scaring Swamp Thing, and then Metropolis is suddenly covered in vines and, forestation and all this stuff. And, of course, who's standing there at the end of this but Superman? This is very much the way that I felt. First, the good parts. Kano's art is terrific. Admittedly, it is following very much in the footsteps of Yannick Paquette and Marco Rudy in creating these very organic this paneling structure. And it looks terrific. It looks great. But this is very much how I felt after Alan Moore ended his run. Now, admittedly, I didn't read it at the time, but, when Alan Moore's run ended and Rick Veitch's run began, I tuned out. I was not interested in it anymore because the voice changed. This is, Charles Soule, however, again, he is not Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder has a much better inkling of drama. He has a much better inkling of character creation. He has he's just a much more solid writer, and we know this. But he just doesn't have the voice that Snyder does, and Alex sounds very different. Admittedly, he's been through a very changing experience, a completely life-altering experience. But even his voice sounds his voice sounds different. It doesn't quite sound like the Alec Holland that we already have grown to love during the course of Snyder's run on this title. And what's really upsetting to me about this is that it is essentially almost a complete retread of the same idea that Alan Moore had with when basically Swamp Thing came to Gotham City to kind of hold the city hostage to save Abby. And that was brilliant, and this seems very hacky, because it almost has the same exact finale, where you see kind of, you see you see the all of the flora and fauna and everything like that engulfing Metropolis, and then you have this reveal of Superman kind of hovering there. It's like Holland, and it's just like, really, as they had in Gotham City with Batman. It's just like, we've seen this already, for Christ's sake. I mean, really, your first issue as the new writer taking over from Scott fucking Snyder, you're gonna rehash an Alan Moore-ish storyline? I mean, I know, yes, that wasn't caused by the Scarecrow, but it's the same basic idea, is that that Superman and Swamp Thing are going to come to blows. And it sapped out of me all of my passion for this title in one issue. It took just one issue to say, yeah, I'm dropping Swamp Thing. There's just, obviously Scott Snyder's a really tough act to follow, but I just was hoping that we would see something that would be a lot more interesting, and this is just not, like, let's reintroduce, let's bring in the Floronic Man, let's bring in Jason Woodrue into the New 52, let's get him going, and if you're going to take something from Swamp Thing's past, let's at least bring in somebody that doesn't, that isn't almost an exact copy of a story that we've already seen, and seen done much better. So, yeah, 2 out of 5 for Swamp Thing number 19. Just such a bummer. Such a bummer. So on to our picks of the week. We already know one of them. As I said, the closest, another, being Deadpool number 7. But first and foremost, so the runner-up for the week is Bedlam number 6. So this is the finale of the first story arc, where basically we have Fillmore is confronting the Archbishop in prison, and the First is confronting Eric in the hospital. And basically what we have here is that Fillmore kind of, because of who he is and was, really kind of gets into the Archbishop's head, kind of sees his endgame, if you will. is that, because the Archbishop, he is, we're getting the sense that this guy is totally fucking gone. He's talking about, Bedlam just being the city itself is just, it's a cesspool of sin, and, it needs to be purged from the earth. The end times are near. This guy, has clearly, blown his porch light. So, and Fillmore understands this, and, the first request that the Archbishop has is to hear Fillmore's confession. And basically he kind of works a deal with the Archbishop. Well, if you hear my confession, will you stop your angel of death, Eric? And we kind of cut back and forth to this fight that the First and Eric are having. And Fillmore ultimately does offer his confession. And he does confess that, yes, indeed, he was matter red. But he's better now. At least we hope. And we see that, because of this deal and because of the confidentiality between, priest and confessor, that, his secret will remain safe, and he can get him to call off Eric, which he literally does. I thought that was a little bit contrived, him literally making a call while in the prison, and, calling the hospital phone to get in touch with Eric, and Eric then plunges to his death. And the ending here that we have is very, very unsettling, because it is kind of maybe paving the way for the next arc, but it is also, we see, we start to see that Acevedo is, she's starting to see the city in a bit of a different light, and maybe this will bring her more around to, maybe she will start working with Fillmore a little bit more, and they will have this kind of mismatched partner relationship, I think, which would be really interesting for this book, for a direction like that to go in. I mean, first of all, it's just an incredibly powerful book. Not just because of the story that it tells, but because, Riley Rossmo's art is so, it's very, what I call light dark. It is, it's like the tones in the pages are kind of light, but the strangeness of the faces and just kind of the surrealism of some of the drawings are very off kilter. And, even some of kind of the angles that he uses are a little bit askew. So you just get this kind of pervasive feeling of, this kind of shudder that kind of creeps up your spine. But it's still, it entertains, because Fillmore, he's a fun character. I mean, he's such a unique character, because he is someone who is kind of, he's not crazy anymore, but he has this incredible insight into insanity. So, which is why he's been so effective in helping, in helping everything that's happened, helping to stop everything that is happening. And one of the other really interesting things about this book is that it shows how totally ineffectual, or not totally ineffectual, but that it shows the First as somewhat of an ineffectual hero. Is because while all this is going down, I mean, it's like, you would normally expect, okay, here comes the superhero to stop the crazed gunman in the hospital, but he keeps getting smacked around by this guy. And, this is something where, Batman would have this wrapped up in, in a hot second, and this fight between the two of them drags out for so long because he just can't seem to get the job done. And of course, it's up to Fillmore to get the job done. So, it's kind of almost shaming the superhero in this issue, which I thought was really fun to have who was, you know, the first arch nemesis, Matter Red, to actually come in and actually save the day. It's more of kind of this kind of humiliating aspect. Not that that's, I think, something that's even on Fillmore's mind, but that, you know, it's just something dramatically that works very well. I'm really going to miss Rossimo's art because he's off this title now, which I think is strange because it is, you know, he's been obviously such a huge part of it. But I think as long as Nick Spencer keeps this level of intensity and storytelling up, this will still be a really excellent comic. So this was a pretty soft 5 out of 5. It kind of, you know, it's kind of more 4.75 out of 5, but it would be very solid. So I just rounded up and said this is a 5 out of 5. This is definitely a pick of the week. But the pick of the week goes to something that I wasn't quite sure was ever going to be a pick of the week until now. And that is Indestructible Hulk number 6. I mean, this was so good. I mean, because this is literally, it is super nostalgic thrill ride for Mark Waid and new artist Walt Simonson. And who better to have Walt Simonson, you know, who better to have Mark Waid bring in the character of Thor into his work other than Walt Simonson? Because we even have, okay, so basically, you know, we have, you know, Banner and his team of all of his different scientists are working to, they've created kind of a centrifuge in which they're going to use the fragment of Uru Hammer that they have to create essentially a portal to Jotunheim. Because obviously with Banner's dealings with Thor over the years, he knows that, you know, the 9 realms do in fact exist and has probably been to them on a couple of occasions. And so he knows that in Jotunheim there is this element called I can't even read my own writing here. It's like, Eiderderm. And the U, of course, has the umlaut. And it's basically, it's a possible superconducting element that could revolutionize the way that we use fuel and could eliminate the world's the reliance on fossil fuels within, you know, possibly 10 years, if you can just get this from Jotunheim and get it on out. But of course, Jotunheim means frost giants. And Walt Simonson, if we're going to Jotunheim, it means Thor. And Thor comes in rocking the old look, rocking the decidedly, you know, the pretty consistent Thor look that we've had, you know, that they had until kind of the more modern era where he's kind of more armored and everything like that. You know, it's the old style uniform, and he's got the old style of hair and everything like that. And it's, you know, in his communication with Thor, he realized, you know, Thor says, "I don't know who you are, Bruce Banner. But you know, all you Midgardians, you know, you're my kind of people." And this, of course, clues Bruce in real quick that maybe something's a little amiss here. And then we have frost giants, Thor, Mjolnir, Hulk. Mjolnir. and we have this last page that if it were any other writer and any other artist working together, it would look silly. If this were, Simonson and Leinil Yu, it would look goofy. But because it's Simonson, because it's Waid and Simonson, it's awesome. I mean, it's so awesome. I mean, this was just, it was just a powerhouse of mythic entertainment. I mean, this was just, I had so much fun with this issue, and it just made me glad. It just made me so kind of deliriously happy because it was this really fun throwback to kind of the Simonson Thor era, which is, presumably why he kind of looks the way that he does. And that, I mean, and Simonson's art has a couple of, there are some tiny missteps. There is this weird kind of opening part where there's this woman who is, about to gobble up all these pills, and I don't know who this person is. Is it one of the people that's on Bruce's team? We don't really know. But once we get to Jotunheim, and once we get some of these big splash pages where, they open up the portal and everything like that, and just everything is just, that's where Simonson's magic just comes to, a perfect pitch, and it looks fucking glorious, and it is a tremendously entertaining read. For those of you who are not reading Indestructible Hulk, if you haven't been reading it before, this is a perfect issue for you to jump on. Now, I don't know how long Simonson is going to be with this book, but this is the art that I've been waiting for on this book. Never mind that it has, kind of the Simonson era Thor in it, but, the fact that it is just, it's so well written, it's so well drawn, it just gives you this kind of warm fuzzy inside. And, just that final page is so fucking awesome. I mean, when I kept thinking of great moments from comic books, even from the last month or so, I would say this is definitely one of them. This is one of the best pages of a comic in, it's one of the best pages of this year. Absolutely. It was just so great to see. And I cannot wait for the next issue. I hope it's coming really soon. But I'll forgive it if it doesn't, because this is, if it takes them the full 4 weeks to get the next issue out, I'm cool with that, because, Wade's kind of getting a little bit, he's not feeling overextended, because obviously with all the great work that he's doing on Daredevil, with his work on this, now he's introduced, now he's doing the Green Hornet, and he has his Steed and Mrs. Peel series over at whatever company that's at. He doesn't feel overextended at all, unlike some people that I've talked about this week. Jeff, Lemire, I'm looking at you. But anyway, that's it. We're done. So, if this is your first time watching or listening, obviously, as most of you know, I'm on iTunes. So those of you who are just listening, hello. How are you out there? Again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. I intended this to be shorter, as I normally do. And just, I tweeted about this earlier this week, that when I looked at the comic books that were coming out this week, yeah, next week is probably going to be 2 separate episodes, and they're probably going to both be this length, because there's a lot coming out this week, and a lot of regularly really awesome books. So hold on to your hats, because next week we're going to get pretty fucking epic. I mean, I know that you guys consider an hour and 39 minutes to be epic, but I mean, this is, you know, this is kind of the regular thing here now. This is pretty much the regular length. I mean, this was a short week. You know, this was kind of a small week, and still ended up being this long. But of course, tangents, so on and so forth. I will try and keep that stuff to a minimum next week, unless there's other big news that comes out. So, again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. You know, because if this is the type of thing that you like, then this is what you're going to be getting every week. With the exception of last week, which unfortunately I was just too sick and too miserable to do this. So that's why it happened the way it happened. So again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Again, follow me on Twitter. I'm at Donnelly92274. And I'm on Facebook, James Donnelly. You can find me. I'm the guy with the Shadow Gallery, you know, imprint as my profile picture, so you know who I am. So until next time, I want to say good night until the next episode of New Comics Bitches begins. I want to thank you again for listening, and my name is James Donnelly. You are now leaving the Shadow Gallery, and as always, I'm here to remind you to always stay in the shadow.